Warning: this stream is rated for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Legion Cage Adopt-A-Pet.com theater. My name is Scotty, and I will be your host. If you're watching this on the video on demand, I would just like to have you check out Adopt-A-Pet.com and search for your local shelter. Sorry, right at the last second, my co-host here, who is not going to appear on camera, my brother and his roommate's dog uh, did not like something happened to spook her, so she's shivering under the desk right now. All right, so I'm just a little bit off camera here while I'm consoling her. Might have been fireworks going off and I didn't hear that. You know how dogs are with the fireworks. So I don't know why there's something going on with this thing here. See if I can fix that. If I hide that, yeah, it does that. I don't know why it's up here all of a sudden. It's okay, doggy. You'll be fine. All right, well, we'll just have to here, let's see if we can. There we go. That fixed it. Okay. All right. So I don't think there's really anybody in here. Aside from somebody lurking in the background while he's doing his own stream. Um, and I didn't quite prepare well enough for this, like I wanted to. Um, I have some concepts in mind that I want to do for this particular show before the politics. Um, and I think what I'm going to be, if I can get everything settled and in order for the next time, it's going to be kind of more of a slideshow presentation. Either way, the show is just pretty much me ranting for a little while, and it's going to be interactive in the fact that if there are people here, I'm more than happy to um, do some polls and get some feedback, some opinions. So, anybody that comes in here for these is more than welcome to share their own opinions and add to the discussion, because I'm just one person, I'm just one mind. I'm not going to get everything right, and I don't think that I ever will. So the information and the opinions that I present here are my own. I'll just put that as a little bit of a disclaimer. And of course, anybody's welcome to come in and join the discussion at any time, and hopefully that will add to it for anybody that wants to watch, even if you're just watching it after the fact, on the video on demand or in the EBC archive. Um, so the concept behind this show, Before the Politics, is right in the name, and that is, you can have all sorts of discussions on politics. Um, and in particular, I would say that mostly applies to big, controversial topics like gun rights or abortion or the economy or whatever, is something that you feel strongly about politically. But one thing that I've noticed over, say, 15 years of my adult life, watching everything from the president of the United States and the presidents, the leaders of other world nations, all the way down to the most insignificant person. And that is, there are so many things that in the pure, typical, everyday discussion of uh, how people feel about politics, either one one way or the other. Typically, it sometimes deals with party lines, and sometimes deals with, like, political ideologies. But for the most part, I think that a lot of people completely miss certain aspects of political debates and ignore them because they either think they are a given, or they um they don't feel that they either know enough about it, or somebody else doesn't know enough about it. In other words, there are aspects to political debates that people will readily glaze over, dismiss, or ignore because of whatever reason they come up with. And I'll give you a quick example. That's not going to be our topic for today, but um, a quick example. In the next one, I'm going to discuss abortion rights. And because that's real big in the news in the United States with the Supreme Court decision that just came down last week, and how that pertains to a lot of people and how they deal with things. And one thing that I think that people really glaze over in any type of political debate about abortion is, when does life begin? See, because if you want to talk about whether or not a mother has a right to abort her baby, uh, at least in my mind, something that has to be defined before that even occurs is, what is the starting point of life, and is it possible in this discussion to come up with a definition of when life begins that can be universally accepted across the board, because that gives us a common foundation from where we would start the debate. So, in my mind, and that's part of the reason why I had this concept for probably close to a year, is all of these questions that just, fly around in my head regarding political debates, and nobody seems to willing to answer them or spend any time on them. I mean, yeah, I could sit here and give you my opinion on the abortion debate, whether or not it's a good thing if a woman has a right to life, a right to abort the child, or if the child has a right to life, or any of that stuff. That's easy. It's easy for me to sit here and give you my political opinions. But it seems in our society, it's almost a lost art to do the heavy work of having ideological debates and conversations about the things that some people take for a given. And I really appreciate Erica rating us with a party of 21. Thank you so much. Let me give you a shout out real quick. There we go. If you're not following Erica, please do so. And yeah, Isnib is here to help with the heavy work. Yeah, just fair warning, folks. I really appreciate the raid and all that, but this is going to be a serious topic, a serious stream, at least for probably another hour and 15 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. So we're going to touch maybe on a few things that are not that entertaining. In fact, I know it's not going to be that entertaining. So by all means, stick around. If you want to, join in the conversation, as I was saying before you folks came in with the raid, I am going to do some polls, and you're more than welcome to join in the conversation and chat, give your opinions, and I will be asking questions throughout the whole thing. But yeah, okay. I appreciate you. I really do. So welcome, Raiders. If you do want to bounce because you're not into serious topics, you're not into discussion like that, you're just kind of like, for the games and that, by all means, I'm not going to be offended if you want to take off. So, but thank you for joining us. I really appreciate you. Welcome. And today's topic, this is the first episode that I'm doing of this called Before the Politics. As I was just briefly explaining in the opening there, I believe there's a number of different questions that should be asked that people glaze over or dismiss, or they kind of overlook because they think it's a given. And that all comes before the major debates that happen in politics. So I had mentioned abortion. My next episode on this is going to be on the abortion debate because it is such a huge topic in the United States right now after the Supreme Court decision came down. But today's discussion, being that it's closer to July 4th, is going to be about freedom, liberty, and independence. So, before we go any further on this, I found a video on YouTube that I thought really kind of sums up at least the introduction to that topic. And that is, what is freedom to you? So we're going to watch that video on YouTube, and you can comment here, as will I, and let me know what you think here. So let's bring that up. And we need some audio. There we go. Okay.
I think that freedom is something that exists solely in your mind.
can see the world, meet hundreds of thousands of people, count endless adventures, and experience seemingly infinite boundlessness. Yet you can feel lost, drowning, trapped and lonely. Never settled, always seeking, one day asking yourself, what is
Freedom.
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 Styrka.
Libertad.
Freiheit.
Frihet.
Azadi.
Subsidiaritet.
Libertad.
Liria.
Sudandira.
Feri.
Svoboda.
Lullaji.
La libertà è
Skalaya.
Frelsi.
Freiheit.
Khofish. Dieu.
If you ask people from different continents, countries and places, some have a very clear opinion.
basically, in a nutshell, freedom is
Having choices in all aspects of life.
I can decide everything by myself.
Without being influenced by other people.
To be who you want to be.
Do what you want to do.
To live without judgment. No free control.
An elaborated definition.
Freedom means creativity without borders.
The flexibility to choose your future.
And being able to express yourself in the world without need for apology.
Setting up your life in a way where neither your mindset nor your bank account can deter you from doing whatever you want.
Not making compromises with yourself, with who you are, your passions, in order to provide for you and your family.
Sometimes romantic.
La cosa più bella che c'è è svegliarsi la mattina e scegliere il posto in cui poter vivere.
Stepping out of trying to earn my own place and stepping into unconditional love.
A state where you can reach your fullest potential.
Freiheit bedeutet, seinem Herzen folgen zu können.
To be one with yourself as well with the nature.
And pure happiness and love is true freedom.
Often poetic.
Freedom means no boundaries. To exist like the wind, like the air, like the breeze.
Love is freedom and freedom is love.
Open to everything, attached to nothing.
自由とはイマジネーションだと思います。
Libertad es voluntad.
Freedom is peace.
Yet we would be astonished if we knew how similar we think.
Liria pour moi është bëj atë çfarë më pëlqen mua.
Being able to do whatever you want.
Nothing to worry, nothing to plan, nothing to think in the future or in the past.
Wenn ich den ganzen Tag machen kann, was ich will.
And choose your own path in life.
The right to choose your own way.
Whatever that you want for yourself.
But if you give us a little more time to question these concepts, we might struggle to find an answer.
Freedom is the possibility of doing the most stupidest shit possible and learn from it and try again and become a little bit of a better person, kinder and loving.
the ability to think,
And the right to act. And to think as one without hindrance or any restraint.
but in reality, to me, freedom means a little bit more than that.
We rethink, resign, reconsider and realize it's not that easy.
The basic idea of freedom without consequences.
We start to see new horizons and the responsibility behind them.
We are quite privileged.
There's physical freedom, spiritual freedom, there's mental freedom, and there's financial freedom. Some of us may be able to experience all, some may be able to experience one, some none.
Once you are integrated in a society or in a community, you must always remember that your freedom can negatively influence the freedom of others.
With respect.
Be accountable for your actions.
As long as it doesn't hurt or impede on anybody else.
So freedom has its own limits.
It's responsibility to do what you want, right? You have to have a responsibility in freedom. Like the definition of freedom says you don't need any responsibility, you don't have any consequences, but the reality of the world is you do.
I don't believe that anywhere in the world there's full freedom.
On an island chain in the Western Pacific Ocean, freedom is out of question. The local people do not even have a word for it. No matter the situation or their history, people here always felt free. What seems natural and obvious to us, in a different culture, might mean the world for someone else.
I want to make own business.
The girl also have the work like the man.
regardless of where you're from, the language you speak, or the color of your skin.
Comes in the caste. That is the freedom for us.
If someone else is the one making your choices, then it isn't truly your story that's being told.
I think you can use your freedom wisely.
Freedom gives me the ability to go home at the end of the night to see my wife and my 3 sons, and it gives me the ability to also make a difference in the world.
We are all just
trying to be the best us.
And in the end, you have to
do it your way, walk the walk and talk the talk you believe in.
The choice is up to me.
You decide.
So rather than asking what freedom means, maybe you should ask yourself, are you free? Maybe there's less thoughts to be wasted, less time to be spent searching, and more necessity to ultimately let go and be. Imagine we would stop asking, stop seeking, and start to really appreciate and see. Maybe the meaning of it all is very simple.
So, be happy.
All right, so I'm going to, and first of all, if you see me lean down like this, I apologize. Just before you all came in, I think there was a really loud firework, and my brother's dog is under the desk shaking, so I'm just, keeping an eye on her and making sure she's okay. She just needed, to feel safe. All right, so
one of the things I tell young
the first thing is when it comes to, hold on, let me there we go. That's my notes. Yeah, unfortunately, that's one of the downsides is, here in America, we set off a lot of fireworks, and the dogs really do not do well with that. Although, if you're looking for advice on that, I can give you some short advice real quick, and that is definitely get one of the chest harnesses. That definitely helps with dogs feeling safe during stuff like that, and just be right there for them. A lot of touching and petting, and they should be okay. At least as long as they feel safe, it's definitely going to be better psychologically, and that's two of the best ways that I've found in my research. But in any case, so let's move on here. The first thing I would say is, if you want to join in the discussion, you're more than welcome to. Go ahead and put in chat now what freedom means to you specifically. Like, if you were to define freedom and how it impacts you and what's important to you, go ahead. Write that in there and let me know, and let everybody else know what it is that you feel is important to freedom. In the meantime, I'm going to start setting up a poll here. I got to come over here and go into this thing now. Okay, now we're here. I'm going to set up our first poll. Okay. The ability to think, feel, say, and express anything to start with. Being able to do the things you want to do without oppressing others. That's very key. And without them oppressing me, all within reason, of course. And see, that's part of it. The discussion is the reason. What does within reason mean? ISNIB is primarily referring to freedom of speech, which I think would, for the most part, blanket cover that. Freedom of thought, the ability to do anything you want, assuming it doesn't infringe on anyone else's ability to do the same. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty close to what Cage said, but just slightly different wording and slightly other emphasis there. All right, so the first poll I put up there, are you free? A very direct and should be simple question. And already we've got 3 people that say no. Now that's kind of interesting to me, especially if you're living in the United States that's supposed to be the land of the free. Are you free? If you aren't free, what is preventing you from being free? And the reason, okay, take care. We'll see you later, Cage. Thank you for stopping by. The reason I ask that, just as a primer for what comes after this, is that I think we can all universally agree that slavery is a bad thing. No person should be able to own another person. And almost universally, people would agree with that, except for the very small minority of people throughout the world that believe or justify that slavery is acceptable. In America, that, for the most part, died out with the Civil War in the 1850s. Although there was still, people after the fact that justified it and thought it was a bad thing that happened, mostly in the South. But to this day, there's still countries that practice slavery. Quite a few of them are in the Middle East. Quite a few of them are in Africa. And you have to wonder to yourself, okay, not only how do these people justify that slavery is a good thing? Sorry about the vehicle outside. I can't do anything about those sounds. How do they justify it? Okay, well, the way the people in the South in America justified it up until they were forced to get rid of it was the economic reasons, that their entire economic society depended on slavery because it was so entrenched and built into it over the previous 100 years. And so it was easy for them to say, we support slavery because if we don't have it, it's going to be our economic demise, or it's going to so drastically change this that it's going to harm many, many people, including the slaves. And that's how they justified it. And then maybe they would further justify it by saying, well, it's for their own good. They don't know what's good for them, so we provide them with a purpose, we provide them with protection, all this other bullshit that they came up with to justify slavery. And even today, in these countries that do not recognize that as a basic human right, they will justify it by any means possible, including something as simple and what we would probably recognize as morally repulsive as, well, I just want to retain power. So, of course, slavery is an okay thing. It's just... And obviously, people come from different backgrounds or raised different ways. You wonder how, supposing, for instance, the Ku Klux Klan is still alive in America after all this time in the 21st century, how is it that the Ku Klux Klan is still there with people that actually truly believe that white supremacy is a good thing, and that other races other than white are lesser beings? How do they justify that? So the first thing is, I think it's almost universally recognized that slavery is a bad thing. And the reason why is because almost universally people recognize that you have a right to be free. You have a right to lead your own life, lead your own existence, make your decisions on your own, and you have a right to do all of those things without being forced and hindered by other people that want to control you. But almost universally, we recognize slavery as a bad thing. And yet, in other forms other than people owning people outright, we have so much slavery that's prevalent in our world, even in America, even in the United Kingdom, even in so-called civilized nations. And we're going to get into some of that there. But I find it absolutely interesting that that first question I asked on the poll, obviously we only had 3 people answer, but all 3 of you said, no, we are not free. Okay, so if you are not free, that means that wherever you are in the world, somebody is holding you to a level of restriction that you do not find acceptable and you wish you were more free. Okay? So if I said to you, what does freedom mean to you? And you say, something other than what I have right now, then, and enough people hold that same opinion, then maybe you want to look at what exactly is going on in the government or in the big business or any of the other things that are affecting you so negatively that you do not feel that you actually have freedom. And then later on, far down the road, you would take a look and say, okay, how do I actually affect change so that I can be free? So that I can experience true freedom. If nobody is free, because of whatever reason, what are the steps that are going to be required to obtain that freedom? So what does freedom mean to you? I'll tell you what it means to me. The ability to do what you want, when you want, so long as you do not harm others. And that's not going to show up properly unless I... Hold on, let me... No, not there. How am I going to do this? Let me see if I could just set it like that. Okay, that's good enough for now. We'll figure out something else. So that actually echoes what Isnib and Cage said there pretty much. I tried to make it a little bit more concise. And if you're actually looking at like political ideologies, this is what's known as the libertarian ideology. And here's what I will... Oh, what's the name of that? Man, it escapes me. Hopefully I'm going to come up with it in a minute. There's a principle. Oh, here it is. Which is the non-aggression principle. If I could spell aggression properly, that would be fantastic. So most libertarians live by the non-aggression principle, and if you look that up, you're going to be able to find it relatively easy, and then you can tell me whether or not you agree with it. I'm not going to do a poll on that specifically, but the non-aggression principle basically states that you can do whatever you want, whenever you want, as long as you do not harm others. You are not allowed to bring aggression onto other people because that violates this principle, and therefore that is a natural restriction on your freedom, the ability to choose what you want to do and when. And it's one that you would also take willingly, because, as you may have heard often in the video, freedom equals responsibility. So that aspect of it has been widely recognized, I think, by many people that are advocates for freedom. If you want to have the freedom to do what you want when you want, you have to exercise the responsibility of not harming others while you do that. So again, it's probably abundantly clear that if the freedom that I want is to go murder somebody, I can't do that because I'm exercising aggression towards another person. I'm violating their rights. I'm exercising violence. I do not have the right to exercise that freedom, because it comes with the responsibility of recognizing that I cannot, in my freedom, harm another person. So, here is one question that I wonder how many people have actually considered in the context of freedom. I know quite a few people have, but maybe you haven't. So, and that is, if you have COVID, are you free to be out in public where you could possibly harm others by spreading the virus? If you can't answer that question, you're not alone. If you feel you can answer that question, good for you. Because, I'm not even paying attention to my own thing here. That is a difficult question. Some people feel it's very easy. Sure, lock people down, place all the government restrictions out there. You got to wear a mask, you got to be 6 feet from each other, you got to do this and that if you want to be out in public, because otherwise you could harm others. For other people, it's not so easy to answer, and they struggle with it. So what limitations are necessary on freedom? Who decides those limitations? Do you just leave it up to the government to decide because the government is the entity that governs our relationships? Or is there some other entity in our society that will better determine what the limitations on freedom should be, when they should be, what those limitations are based on? I mean, here in America, the government relied on the Center for Disease Control to hand out policies on how they felt the public should address COVID, and the government took that and then enacted governing laws, even temporary ones, to then put those policies into practice. And there were people that were arrested. I don't know if you saw it back in May of 2020 or whenever it was. A guy that was out surfing in the ocean off of California coast, LA, somewhere like that, I can't remember, that as soon as he came in, he was arrested for violating the law that you were not allowed to be out there You were not allowed to be in public unless you had a valid reason according to the government, which was not to go surfing, only if you had like a job that required you to be out there working and all that. And he was arrested. Was that a violation of his rights for freedom, to the ability to go out and choose to go surfing that day? Or was that the responsible thing for the government to do in limiting his freedom? I couldn't tell you. I mean, I have my opinion, but I'm not an authority on this sort of thing. What you have to decide is, was that a legitimate exercising of the power that government has to limit that man's freedom? And any other aspect of that happened around the world, as almost every single government except for Switzerland, or was it Switzerland or Norway? One of those Nordic countries up there never shut down. I believe it was Switzerland, but I'm not positive. Every single country around the world did that. Did they act with the proper authority to limit people's freedoms like that when they shut down for COVID? So I think another question that should be asked here is, do the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few? You know what? We'll do a poll for this one here. Let me bring this up. In fact, let me put this over here. New poll. And at least for now, unless somebody has another suggestion, I will add to it. But you may know that I'm a big Star Trek fan. So in Star Trek 2, the movie, Spock is going to sacrifice himself to save the Enterprise crew. And Captain Kirk, who is his best friend, is struggling so much with this that he's about to lose his best friend because he has sacrificed himself. And Spock says the words, "The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few." So, is that true? Do the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few? I don't know if anybody's even still listening, but if you are, make your voice known in the poll, please. More often than not, I think a lot of people look at society as a give and take. And they say, well, if you've got, let's say, 100 people in a room, and 99 of those people depend on one person, whatever the situation is, that the one person does not get to dictate to the 99 people what their fate is. And therefore, since there's 99 souls there, that's going to outweigh just one soul and what's going to happen there. So, do the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few? Have you ever considered that question in the context of freedom? Have you ever understood what is going to play into a situation like that. Let's say that the 99 people in the room are only going to be able to live if that one person sacrifices themselves. But if that one person doesn't want to sacrifice themselves, can the 99 people force him into sacrificing himself so that the 99 may live? And moral dilemmas like this are replete throughout history and have been considered by greater minds than anybody here, including myself. I'm no prize when it comes to that. I probably have, like a goal to be an intellectual mind, but I mean, I'm nobody special. When it comes to a moral decision like that, how do you quantify your answer? Are the 99 people more important than that one person? If he doesn't want to sacrifice himself for the rest of the people there, is he allowed to do that? And I do know that that question was at least partially asked in one of the Batman movies, when they had a boat full of prison convicts and a boat full of just regular citizens, and the Joker had given them the test that they had a detonator to blow up the other boat, and if they didn't do that by a certain time limit, so one of the two choose to blow up the other boat, then both of them were going to blow up. And that was the scenario that was presented to this people, and in quick succession, they had to go back and forth, showing how the people would react to that, how they would decide, how they would proceed. Are we really going to go through with this? Are we going to kill all these people over on this other boat that we never met simply to save ourselves? Or are we going to do nothing? Or are we going to allow them to blow us up so that we sacrifice ourselves for them? And then you've got the differing opinions of all the different people that are in that room that had to be taken into account. And in particular, on the prison convict boat, they had one guy that stood up and said, "Y'all are fucking fools. Give me that detonator. We're not blowing anything up." And he was being held up in the storyline as a paragon of honor, because even though he was a prison convict, he was choosing the honorable and right path by not sacrificing somebody else so that they may live, right? So now that the poll is over, and hello, Ben from the Gaming Avengers, do the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few? Yes, but with limitations. Now, I specifically in that poll limited the answers to either yes, no, or yes, but with limitations. And there are definitely limitations on that if you say yes. The reason I did that specifically is because now we can definitely, I think, define two paths with that answer. Yes, but with limitations. And that limitation is, or at least one of the major limitations should be, does the person who is sacrificing something up to and including their life for the many make that choice willingly, or are they forced into it? So I think we could definitely draw an ethical line to say, if Spock is there and he's going to save the ship by sacrificing his life, and he does that willingly, then yes, that is a good and honorable thing, and he's able to do that, and all is well. Except for the fact that we have lost an honorable person in the process. The other route would be forcing Spock. He doesn't want to do it, but Captain Kirk is going to order him in there to his death. And is that the right thing to do? Or let's say, any other type of scenario that leads up to that, where a group is forcing a person to be the sacrificial lamb. And that, I think, is where that limitation should be drawn on the needs of the many outweighing the needs of the few. But there could be even further things that I'm not considering. If you have any, suggestions for that, what should be added to that? Limitations on, do the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few? Put them in the chat. Let me know. Give me your opinion. The other thing coming into play here, excuse me, before we get to a big question with this, that's pretty much where all of this is leading up to. Let's say I have a right to medical care. And I'm going to be doing a show on this that's quite some time into the future, but how do you define a right? So most definitely, this is a question I think a lot of people just do not really address, because it's not something that is taught in school. I mean, we hear about rights all the time, but have you ever been asked to define what a right is? I should put a right. Have you ever been asked to define what a right is? And if you haven't, how would you define a right? I mean, we could look up the dictionary definition here, but it's so much deeper even than I think the dictionary definition. So let's look that up real quick, see if I can find, what's applicable here. So as a noun, a right is qualities, at least the first definition here. Qualities such as adherence to duty or obedience to law, authority that together constitute the ideal of moral propriety or merit moral approval. That doesn't really deal with this. Something to which one has a just claim. So do you have a just claim to something, like voting? I mean, I in a full democratic society, I think just about everybody recognizes that you have a right to vote, and that right has also been fought for many times. I mean, you talk about Susan B. Anthony and the women's suffrage back in the 1920s, and before that, the ability of somebody who had black skin to vote. How do you define a right? Because people back then would have said, well, a woman doesn't have a right to vote, and here's how they would justify it. What changed? Now, I've got more information on that, but I don't want to get off on a big tangent. I'm just using this as an example. So, something to which one has a just claim. How do you define just? If I said I had a right to a basic level of income without doing anything, and this is, they're talking about universal basic income in some areas of the country. In fact, I think some cities have already done it. Introduced a universal basic income where no matter what you do, you're going to get a minimum, say, $1,000 a month from the government. Why? Because people in those types of political ideologies recognize that it is very difficult if you have nothing, if you are dirt poor, to be able to pull yourself out of that and do something productive with your life, to not be dirt poor for the rest of your life if you don't already have some money, if you don't have already have something. So that's how they say, okay, well, as a government, we're going to try to care for poor people by providing them a universal basic level of income. How do you justify that? How do you say this is something, or rather, how do you quantify it, I should say? How do you justify and say that this is something that must be done in order to affect positive change in our society? And obviously those arguments can get very complex and whatever, everything else, but we cannot decide as a society or as a world species that these are things that should be done in the form of governmental policy or laws that say you can or cannot do this as a person. The very limitations that most of society would agree have to be on freedom, without first knowing what a right is or what that freedom entails. Is it going to be according to what I put there, the non-aggression principle, which is the ability to do what you want as long as you do not harm others? Okay, if that's the foundation by which we limit people's freedom, then everybody has to agree that that non-aggression principle is the foundation. But we don't do that right now. What is the foundation of freedom? Your ability to do what you want so long as you do not harm others or anything else. Now, this is where I'm going to get a little angry, so to speak. Have you ever gotten a ticket for not wearing your seatbelt? Did you ever get pulled over by the police and maybe you were speeding or maybe you did something else and they're like, oh, you're not wearing your seatbelt. Well, I'm gonna give you a ticket for that. Okay, well, Ben has never gotten a seatbelt ticket because he always wears his seatbelt. I always wear my seatbelt now. I didn't always used to. And part of the reason, which I would agree this is not a good justification for not wearing my seatbelt, is because I'm frickin' fat, and most seat belts that come with the vehicles do not fit around me. It just will not buckle in. Now, I weigh over 400 pounds. When I was weighed 500 pounds, imagine that I did not have the ability to buckle up my seatbelt because I weighed 500 pounds. Now, they do make seatbelt extenders. And in fact, I have been using one for quite some time. But seatbelt extenders are $25 each plus tax and shipping on there's really only one website that sells them. I'm sure there's a few other outlets elsewhere, but I mean, as far as I was concerned, trying to find a good seatbelt extender to be able to do that, if I'm poor, and there was quite a few times there during that I was just dirt poor, my decision was I can't afford an extender, so therefore I'm not going to wear my seatbelt, because I can't wear it normally anyway. And I got a couple of seatbelt tickets because of that. I'd get pulled over and they're like, you're not wearing your seatbelt. Here's a ticket for that. And I got to pay the government $50 or $100 or whatever the case may be, whatever they decided it was worth. because I was not following the law that says you have to wear your seatbelt. But my question all along has been, why is wearing your seatbelt a law? Now, I was not able to find in time. There's this commercial that they play on the radio all the time that starts out, do you think not wearing your seatbelt is a personal choice that doesn't affect others? And this is an ad that's put out by, I don't know, the National Highway Association of whatever, some such government agency. And ever since, I think it was like the early 90s when they started enacting these seatbelt laws, you must wear your seatbelt or we can fine you. The whole reasoning behind it was the government saying, we're sick and tired of going into accident scenes and mopping up the bodies of people that did not wear their seatbelt. That's literally their entire justification on it. They say wearing seatbelt can save your life and more than likely will save your life in the event of an accident. And therefore, because we want to improve the quality of people's lives, or improve the chances that they're going to come out of an accident with their life intact, we're going to make it a law that you have to wear your seatbelt. Well, my issue with this is very simple. The only reason that a law should exist is in order to stop a crime from happening. And it doesn't always stop, a law against murder doesn't stop somebody from murdering somebody. They do it all the time. And then if they are caught, they are charged with murder. So more specifically, the law exists so that if somebody does this thing that we would consider a crime, we can charge this person with the violation of that law, that crime, and then put it before a court system that's going to determine whether or not he actually did that. And if he did, then sentence them. So if the only reason that a law exists is to be able to address crime, my problem with that is a crime has to have a victim. If we go back to that aspect of it that I have right here, if I define a law according to this, because we want to maximize freedom. Do we want to maximize freedom? I mean, that's my goal. And going back to the original thing, if we can all agree that slavery is a universally bad thing, that no man should be able to own another person, or any of the other things that come along with slavery, then the goal should be to maximize freedom and remove as many limitations on somebody's freedom as possible. And in addressing the crime situation, I should have the ability to do what I want, which is if I choose not to wear my seatbelt, that's my choice. Who is the victim in that supposed crime? If you can't readily answer that, if you say it's myself, okay, that raises another question. Am I allowed to harm myself under the non-aggression principle or under any definition of society that says you are free? Okay, well, if I'm not allowed to harm myself, well, that gets rid of smoking, drinking, any and all drugs that could harm the body. You can't have treatments for cancer because chemotherapy and radiation are harming the body. You can't have anything that you choose to do to yourself that could harm yourself. See? And I see a double standard there. If you say, I'm not pushing you either way right now. I'm just saying there are two things to that, and you cannot have it both ways. It's impossible to have it both ways. You either choose the one path of saying that a person is not allowed to harm themselves, and therefore a seatbelt law is acceptable because the victim is the person that's being killed or harmed in the accident. And then you justify a seatbelt law because in that crime, the victim is yourself. Or you have the other route that says you can harm yourself and you're allowed to smoke cigarettes, drink alcohol. I mean, they have a law in New York that you're not allowed to buy a soda, pop, whatever you want to call it, carbonated beverage with a whole shitload of sugar in it if it's over 32 ounces. That law was enacted because they wanted to reduce the number of people that were getting diabetes from huge, giant things of sugar-laden drinks, or whatever the case may be. They wanted to reduce medical costs. They want to improve people's lives through laws and legislation. So if you agree that the government has the power and authority to attempt to improve people's lives, to save them from their own poor decisions, then a seatbelt law makes sense. A law against selling large sodas makes sense. A law against cigarettes or alcohol or drugs makes sense. Why up until recently were there all these laws against marijuana all across the country? You cannot smoke weed, you cannot possess weed, you cannot sell weed. Why? Because we are trying through law and legislation to improve society, to get a better result out of people by saying, sorry, you just can't have this thing. Does it stop people? Did it stop people from smoking? No. All it did was cause people that were caught with it to be forced to pay money to the government for the supposed crime of smoking weed. Now, I've got a sneaking suspicion that if I put a poll up right now asking what everybody's position was on whether or not weed should be legal, the overwhelming majority of people are going to say, of course it should be legal. And why? Because most people also recognize by now, except for a very vocal minority, that smoking weed is not that detrimental to your health. It is if you are a young person, like, say, under the age of 16, because your body and your mind are still forming, and smoking weed can have a detriment, the actual THC aspect of it can have a detrimental effect on a mind that is still forming and still growing and still coming to adulthood. And that's also why we have almost a universally recognized age at which a person becomes an adult, and they can make their own choices. But we just saw recently that the FDA has basically shut down a single company, not an entire industry, not a specific product per se, one company, Juul. And that was because they felt it was harming students, even though they really didn't come up with any evidence to support this, that Juul actually advertised their e-cigarettes and their flavored liquid tobacco products to children. But that's what their justification was. Well, we want to improve society by making sure that you don't sell e-cigarettes to kids. Okay, well, that kind of makes sense, but why are you just shutting down the biggest company that provides that Juul? Why aren't you going after everybody? And also, where is the crime in even a child choosing to smoke an e-cigarette? Hell, where is the crime in a child choosing to smoke a regular cigarette? Now, I totally understand like some of the limitations that were placed on the tobacco industry because they were advertising on TV that it was a cool thing to smoke, and it was a cool hell. If you go back to the 50s and 60s, they were citing doctors saying that smoking was healthy for you, which is a complete and outright lie. Okay. And to me, that's a legitimate function of government to intervene into the business world to prevent fraud. And that most definitely is fraud. A tobacco company putting an ad in your face and saying, oh yeah, smoking's perfectly fine. This doctor over here says you could do it and there's no problem. Well, la-di-da, that turned out to be a big fat fucking lie. When it comes to freedom and liberty and independence, you have to, before you get to any of the other major political debates, define what is a right, what is the purpose of a law. If you cannot readily identify a victim other than yourself in a supposed crime, should there be a law against it, like a seatbelt law? Are you allowed to harm yourself? I mean, that's probably one of the biggest glazed over questions in the debate on whether or not, or rather what your freedom should mean. Do you have the freedom to harm yourself? So let's, if there's anybody paying attention. I'll do a poll for this. If anybody's still there and wants to participate, should you have the freedom to harm yourself? This calls a whole kit and caboodle into question, and that is, do you have the ability to not wear a seatbelt? Or should you, rather? Because a lot of these things have been enacted in law, but it's not necessarily based on any kind of definition of this aspect of freedom. Should you have the freedom to harm yourself? It's just a whole bunch of laws that have been enacted because the people that are in power in the legislation department say, oh, we should have a law against this, and they all agree at the time. Okay? Should you have the freedom to harm yourself by not wearing a seatbelt if you so choose? Should you have the freedom to harm yourself by smoking a cigarette if you so choose? Should you have the freedom to harm yourself by being an alcoholic? See, this is one they don't really have a law against. They just have a law against drunk driving. You can drink yourself to death all you want. But why is that any different from choosing not to wear a seatbelt in a car? You have a difference of logistical outcome there. You understand what I'm saying? You have one law with the seatbelt that's designed to protect you from your own poor decision, and when it comes to alcohol, you have no law there designed to protect you from your own bad decision. Why are there two different avenues of approach there? Far more people die from alcoholism, at least in America, than in a car accident every year. So if the object is to save lives, if the object is to improve people's situation, if the object is to improve society as a whole by saving people from themselves, how do you justify no law being against drinking yourself to death? They tried it. Although the object of the law back in the 1920s, that was the prohibition, and you're probably familiar with it, was that alcohol caused all sorts of problems in society. That because of alcohol, you had men beating their wives. Because of alcohol, you had car accidents and people being involved in all sorts of things that damaged property and other people. Because of alcohol, you had civil disagreements. You had men fighting in the streets and men fighting in the bars, and you had all sorts of things. The push for making alcohol illegal in America was based on trying to improve society, based on trying to make people be better people. But they didn't outlaw it outright. They didn't say, sorry, you just can't drink alcohol. They went after the business owners and they said, you cannot sell alcohol. You cannot sell 1 ounce of liquor in this country because we're trying to create a better society and make people be better people. And if you disobey this law, then we're just going to remove your license. You're not going to be allowed to operate. That reminds me of what happened in 2020, at least in Ohio, when our governor decided that nobody could be in a bar beyond 10 p.m. And the reasoning was that people getting drunk in a bar, which the majority of the people that are in a bar that just get completely plastered, happens in the last 4 hours that a bar is open from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. And he said because of that drunken status and because there is a higher risk of transmitting COVID to other people, we're just not going to allow bars to be open past 10 p.m. And then any bar, and there was several in the Cleveland area that were caught operating beyond 10 p.m. They were cited, they were fined, some of them were shut down. Their liquor license, their business license was removed because they did not follow that law that said you cannot do this thing for the good of the public. That is something we're putting in place so we could do what we feel is best in creating a better society. Is that the government's job? If you say yes to that, okay, then you have to quantify what are the limitations on the government. Do we have any ability to say to the government, no, what you are doing is wrong. You are limiting our freedoms too much. We're not going to allow you to do this anymore. What are the methods that has to go through in order to happen? Nobody answered in that poll, which is fine. I got to imagine that, this is dry material. I'm doing it for my own edification, so if nobody wants to participate, that's perfectly fine. Maybe I'm boring you to death. That's perfectly fine too. But the way I look at it is that there's all these things that you have to answer before we start having any type of political debate on what the government policy should be. And I'd like to go back to that seatbelt law. Not only do we have to define a right, and whether or not the non-aggression principle is the foundation for that, and what's the foundation for a right. But you also have to decide whether or not the government is in the business, or should be in the business, of trying to improve people's lives. Is that what the job of the government is? If it isn't, why do people allow it to be? I think more importantly, the question that should be answered there is government, as it stands now, with all of the differences between different states, countries, regions, is that a true reflection of what the people believe in and want? See, if I go back to that initial first question where I had 3 to zip people saying that they were not free according to their own definition of freedom, they're not apparently being accurately represented in their government. This is why I always thought it was kind of interesting that there's this huge fascination in most of the Western world, the United States, Europe, Canada, even some of the other places. Certain people throughout the Western world are enamored with royalty. The United Kingdom has been under the rule of royalty the entire time that it has existed. And hell, the last one, Mary Windsor just celebrated, I don't know, her diamond, platinum, brass jubilee thing. She's been in power for so long. And the UK has the House of Commons and the House of Lords. That's their parliament, where they do have representation, but is it truly a representation of what the people want? Or rather, let me quantify that by saying, in the United States, is Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate, a true representation of what the people want? And there's a whole nother thing on this that deals with what is democracy and what are the other political ideologies that we're not going to get into today. But if you want to be free and you don't feel you are free to a level that you think is acceptable, what do you have to go to? What lengths do you have to go to with your government in order to obtain that freedom? Because there may be other things coming into play, such as aggressive people, aggressive businesses, other aggressive entities out there that want your money, want control over you, all these other things. But far and above all of that, every single place on this earth, aside from maybe tiny pockets of peoples like Aboriginals and that, their freedom is defined by the government. Well, what if government decides tomorrow to take everything away from you? What recourse do you have? What is to prevent that? I mean, I think we could agree that if you have done no wrong, no true wrong, and the government just comes and takes everything from you and throws you in jail, that's a really bad thing, right? I mean, we're talking about fundamental human rights. Almost every single fundamental human right deals with making sure that the government doesn't do those things to you, doesn't take their government force and violate your rights, your freedom. And that has been the epitome of every single fight for freedom around the world for all of history. Somebody saying, my rights are being violated, I'm going to fight for them, and either overthrowing the government or being beaten down into the ground. The French Revolution was people saying, we're sick and tired of the King of France doing all of this shit to us. We're fighting for our rights, and they got beaten down into the ground. Hell, they made an opera about it. How very French. In America, the colonists got tired of the King of England being so oppressive and tyrannical that they said, screw you, we're going our own way. And they fought a brutal war over it. The War for Independence was so divisive in America between the colonists and England, and it wasn't even unified for the most part. You had people here in America that were still trying to be loyal to Britain, and they would fight against those people that were here trying to fight for their freedom and independence. Now that also is a whole nother ball of wax that we're not going to get into detailed, but it's the same goddamn fight that people have been fighting for all of history against oppression and tyranny. You want to know what freedom and liberty and independence are all truly about? People not being treated like they are lesser or lesser beings or worthless. And any way you look at it, no matter what freedom personally means to you, no matter how you do a foundation for it, no matter how you define it, no matter what you support in government policy, in politics, in candidates, or in government action, I guarantee you that you don't want to be a slave. You don't want to be a slave to the people that are trying to oppress you, that all they want is to control you. All they want is to extort money from you, because that means they have the power, they have the money, and you do not. I mean, how is that not a universal standard? To want to be free, to not be under the oppressive thumb of somebody who just wants your shit and just wants to control you. I mean, I think for the most part, people who have decided that freedom is a necessity and are willing to take the steps to fight for their freedom, they've already answered all those questions. What does freedom mean? They already have decided on the foundation the principles that are going to make up what the freedom is that they are fighting for. And they have already decided that since they want to be free, they're going to accept the responsibility that freedom requires. And they damn sure know what their rights are, how they define them, and how to protect them. That's a given. That's my given. So I think that's it. I think we're going to wrap up here. Does anybody, if anybody else has still been paying attention in chat, if you have any other comments or questions or anything else that you'd like to say, go ahead and put them in now. I'm not going to do my typical end of thing spiel here, and we're not going to raid out. I'm just going to end it, and then I'm going to start preparing for the other stream that I'm going to be doing later this evening, which is our Conflux community game night. We're going to be playing Scribble.io, and I'll be streaming it on my channel here. Anybody that is a member of the Conflux is welcome to join, and I'll put the link in chat. All you have to do is go to that link and join the Conflux Discord if you would like to join in. It's going to be fun. It's, you know, we always have a blast doing that sort of thing. Or maybe you've heard me ranting for 90 minutes and you think I'm a horse's ass and you don't want to have anything more to do with me, which by, you know, I would assume by this point you would have already left. So Godspeed. Thank you for stopping by even briefly. And otherwise, you know, if you're still here, you're still, you know, lurking in the background. Maybe you don't want to offer an opinion. Maybe you don't want to get involved or say anything. That's perfectly fine. Like I said, I mostly do this for my own edification. I wanted to have some of these things in my archive for just like not future generations, but just, you know, it's kind of like my personal record. As I said previously, if you didn't catch it, the next time I do a Before the Politics show, which I believe, let me double check my schedule here. I'm not going to do quite as many Before the Politics shows, but they're going to be interspliced throughout here and there. The next time I set it for, I believe, is Sunday, July 17th. So 2 weeks. And I'm definitely going to be addressing the topic of abortion and abortion rights, because that is such a huge part of the news right now. And I apologize for the car outside. I can't do anything about the assholes that do that regularly around here. It's such a huge topic in the news right now, at least in America, ever since a week or a week and a half ago, the Supreme Court decision came down. So if you feel strongly about that, you know, maybe mark that on your calendar, that I'm going to be doing that 2 weeks from today, as long as everything with my schedule works out. Stop by, make your opinions known. Again, we'll have it interactive. We'll have some polls. We'll have some discussion. Anybody that wants to join in. You know, it'll come with fair warning that it's going to be sensitive information. But definitely this same format that I see so many questions that need to be addressed before you decide if you are pro-life or pro-choice. And at least from what I can see, from the way people talk about this sort of thing, those questions are unanswered. Those questions are not addressed. Those questions have not even been considered. And therefore, that's what I want to talk about. I don't want to talk about whether you're pro-choice or pro-life. I want to talk about all these things that I think come before you have that political debate. And things that you should at the very least consider before you make major decisions and opinions like that are going to maybe affect you or your family or other people for the rest of your life. And maybe nobody's really interested in that sort of thing or this entire concept of mine. If you're not, so be it. I'm fine. But I would appreciate anybody who is willing to come and participate. So if that is you, hope to see you then, and good luck in the future. If there's nothing else, we will close out here. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate you. Special thanks to Erica for the raid, and before her, Isnib, who raided Erica. So thank you, folks, for joining. Sticking with the raid, and if you're still here, whether you participate or not, I do appreciate you. So that's about it. We're gonna close out here, and if you would like to join us for the Conflux Community Game Night tonight at 8 p.m., that's gonna start in about an hour and 20 minutes from now. Just join the Discord if you have not done so already, and we will get you signed up to participate. Again, we're gonna be playing Scribble.io, which is a drawing game, and the worse you are at drawing, the better it is, the more hilarious it is. Thanks again for joining. Thank you. We will see you, and adios. Good night.